Hey everyone, welcome back. And next, the ANC still behaves as if they're a liberation movement, rather than coming to the conclusion that they are the governing party. So adding to my most recent video, we're diving straight into the ANC's audit report, and that it really reveals their mindset, their failures, and why South Africa continues to slide backwards even after apartheid ended 31 years ago. Because after reading the report, one thing becomes glaringly obvious. The ANC has still not realized that they are the government, not the opposition, not the liberation army, not a revolutionary movement fighting global forces. I kid you not. They are in power, and they are responsible for delivering services and economic growth. But instead of acknowledging their failures, this report shows how they operate in a nostalgic ideological bubble of excuses. They can continue to moan and groan about the historical injustices, but they sure haven't actually done anything to resolve it either. And meanwhile, South Africans, us, we continue to pay the price. So guys, let's get rambling. And of course, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. It really does support my channel. And then give this video a like and a comment. It tells YouTube that this content is interesting and pushes it out to more people, who I can then convince to subscribe to my channel. It's a win-win, guys, and it really doesn't cost you a cent. Let's dive right in by looking at the opening page of the ANC's report. And it starts with a quote from Oliver Tambo, who's talking about the struggle, the enemies, and learning from the enemies' tactics. Let's dive right in. So Fikile, ANC Secretary General, the opening page for him to address the overview is a quote from Oliver Tambo, and it says this: "Comrades, you might think that it is very difficult to wage a liberation struggle. Wait until you are in power. I might be dead by then. At that stage, you will realize that it is actually more difficult to keep the power than to wage a liberating war. People will be expecting a lot of services from you. You will have to satisfy the various demands of the masses of our people. In the process, be prepared to learn from other people's revolutions. Learn from the enemy also. The enemy is not necessarily doing anything wrong. You may take his right tactics and use them to your advantage. At the same time, avoid repeating the enemy's mistakes." And I feel like the ANC read that and said, boy oh boy, wouldn't it be nice if we did everything but what Oliver Tambo told us to do? Which wouldn't be a surprise coming from the ANC. And that sort of tone carries on throughout the report. The entire report frames everything as a war, a struggle, and a revolution under threat. In fact, whenever any ANC NEC member stands up and speaks, they still continue with a tone and an approach of struggles and revolutions and liberations. But here's the issue. You cannot run a modern-day economy, a 2025 economy, the way you ran your liberation struggle. You cannot fix water, repair roads, grow jobs, or lower unemployment with slogans about the National Development Plan. Tell me how much success the National Development Plan has when it comes to service delivery. If anything, this National Development Plan has taken South Africa backwards and should now be aptly titled a National Destructive Plan. So instead of recognizing their own failures, they blame global forces, the political right, capital media, and would you believe extreme weather patterns. It's not a joke. They really have stooped to just about every low I could potentially think up. So basically the ANC is saying we don't have water because of the weather. Municipalities have collapsed because of capitalism. And youth unemployment is 60% because global politics, I guess. No, that's not how this works anymore. These are failures of governance, failures of leadership, failures of management, failure of the ANC to deliver anything. So even in the ANC's own audit report, and something that Cyril loves to do, speaking to us, his salary payers, or to the international stage, but even in their own report, they say, woe is us, 33% unemployment, 23% of children in severe food poverty, collapsing water and sanitation infrastructure. Yes, those are our problems, ANC, but really what we're looking for, solutions, actions, consequences, accountability. Could you please take South Africa a bit more seriously? We won't be here forever if you carry on treating us like this. Here's what they're not saying. And in fact, here's what none of the mainstream media is saying. All of this happened under ANC rule. Apartheid government gave the ANC a completely functioning profit-making machine. If they had stayed false, not only would the ANC cadres be rich, the entire South Africa would be rich. Because the funny thing about money is you can create more and you can spread it further. The ANC is shrinking the pie of profit. So this all happened under their rule, not apartheid. Global forces. How are global forces responsible for this? The global forces are responsible for funding your corruption, with the EU continuing to give you loans. But in your own audit report, you say the relationship between the USA and the EU is cordial, not beneficial, not laka, cordial. That's a very polite way of saying we get by with each other. Then carry on and talk about how amazing China is. So global forces, maybe you want to stop taking their money then. Vakili even sounds a little bit paranoid in one of his statements, talking about counter-revolutions, the ANC talking about counter-revolutions and global forces, and a line in this report, astonishing, the persistence of the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. Persistence. They're worse now than they were 20 years ago. And that was all under your watch. Like I said in my previous video, the ANC are so used to standing on stage and going, me wanty, we wanty, me demand, and demand. And some the government delivers. Schools, hospitals, universities, jobs, opportunities, anything and everything. But then when the ANC got into power, they forgot that now they're in the shoes of doing the delivery. We need to stop the liberation struggle song. We need to do a liberation action song. It's laughable when you look through the support. There were points where my jaw was on the ground from absolute flabbergasted that they can state the absolute obvious, but as if it's not for them to resolve. As if they write it in a piece of paper and post it on the internet, a miraculous little fairy of infrastructure will appear and make all these problems go away. They actually say municipalities lack technical expertise. Like, no, Sherlock, you've got to be joking. And you know why that is? Because, Mr. ANC, you replaced all your technical engineers, your highly qualified engineers, with political appointees. You've destroyed the education in South Africa. Where do you think these technical expertise come from? Fairyland, the global forces, the counter-revolution. This is because you failed education and you failed job creation. So we can point fingers all we want, scream at the white person, scream at the black person, go to Europe, that's the land where you belong, etc., etc. But we are in 2025. We cannot change the past. We are sitting in a South Africa. This is not apartheid. This is external sabotage. This is ANC misgovernance. Full stop. So Mandiso Masheho appears on State of the Nation, and I really want to encourage you guys to go and watch this full interview. This is the sort of representation that we need when it comes to black business. This is the sort of voice we need to hear. You know, the one thing I really realized and that she brought to light for me was that when you are a successful black businessman or woman, they're incompetent. They cast you out. They ridicule you. They make you feel as if you abandoned the cause, the fight, the movement. So your success means that you are then cast out, judged, ridiculed. What sort of environment is that to encourage job creation, economic growth, if within the very black communities they are ridiculing and judging each other? Racism for me isn't so much about race. It's about culture. Because the Sikhs and the Zulus, they can be racist to each other because it's a cultural thing. And we do not understand each other's cultures. That is the problem with South Africa and the term racist. It's culturalist. You're a culturalist. Okay, I digress sometimes. I apologize. So let's quickly watch this short little snippet where she's actually talking about the ANC.
They have no intention. They have no intention to build an economy. Not only do they not have an intention to build an economy, they don't know how to. And because they live in their cheap little Bantustan egos, and they don't know how to say, I don't know how, please show me. They literally, they couldn't, their egos were so big. What Nelson Mandela did was amazing, was beautiful, was necessary. But they couldn't even engage with the people who were in government then from the previous white government, who were implementing these plans, whether we thought the plans were horrible in terms of how they were implemented, where they were implemented, but they all gave results.
So thanks to that incompetence and their little egos, their inability to say, we don't know how, please can you help us? The ANC has turned South Africa into a place where businesses pay twice for electricity, Eskom, and then their generators. Households pay twice for security via our tax through to SAPS, as well as private security. Municipalities charge you for water you can't drink. Reading this audit report was like watching somebody burn down their own home and then write a report blaming the weather, their neighbors, global forces, the media, capitalism, and the enemy. What the ANC has yet to realize is that South Africans aren't asking for liberations and revolutions. I believe less than 40% of South Africans are asking for revolutions and liberations. The other 60+% is looking for jobs, working sewerage, water that is drinkable, that can come out of a pipe, roads that don't damage your car beyond repair, the lights coming on when you flip the switch, a functioning municipality, a growing economy, and how about some competent leaders? Wouldn't that be nice? Instead, what we have is a political party consumed and absorbed by ego and ideology, and it continues to genuinely believe that the problem is not their fault. The problem is the people rejecting their ideology. And their continued push for EEE shows as much. Because at the end of the day, like Mandiso said, it's all about their ego. Being called chief, leader, being in control of others and their liberation and growth. And having these people rely on you is a power flex, an ego flex. and it's disgusting. But let's take a look at what Mandiso says, because that is fascinating.
It still hasn't happened. You go to any small little municipality in South Africa and ask them for a development planning department. Ask them to speak to their chief engineer, because you have a development. You've got land in that area, and you need to now start dealing with authorizations and licenses, so that maybe you might even have an investor. They'll drop the phone on you, because majority of them don't have development planning. They have no architects, they have no engineers, nothing. So the reason they created the social grant system was for their ego, to have people abazobathandaza, to say, oh, hail my leader, chief. That's what they call each other. They call each other chief and my leader all day long, for their egos. Literally, for their egos. And then they give these people the grants. They know at the time when they're catching them, those guys are still very much naive, rural people who only know how to respect Induna Nenkosi and respect someone from government and respect everyone. Not because they respect them or they want to respect them, because they're hoping to get something from them, right? To patronize them. And that's what they want. They're addicted to that feeling of people calling them leadership, chief. That's it. Don't make it more complex than that.
Right, yeah.
Then they didn't enable development planning.
I love what she says there, because it explains a lot about the what I struggle with. I struggle with, why do they do this? Like, why does Cyril saunter into stage like he is the bee's knees? And the way she says, like it's the chief, my leader, bowing down to them in the ego. And it makes absolutely perfect sense. But then she goes on to say, she says, don't make it more complicated than it is. And I'm like, oh my word, I think in circles trying to figure out what on earth is their intention. And then to hear it as something as simplistic as ego, the destruction of South Africa and the destruction and deaths that have occurred because of the ANC's failures cannot be because of a couple of people's egos. It is just shocking for me. But this ANC report accidentally reveals is that not even the ANC see themselves as the governing party. They all still believe and are running around as if they're freedom fighters. And freedom fighters, unfortunately, cannot run a country. South Africa doesn't need ideology. We need competence, accountability. We need leadership. And until the ANC can recognize that the crisis we find ourselves in is their crisis, self-created, self-inflicted, and sustained through 31 years of bad policy, nothing will change. And as I highlighted in my previous video, an incompetent state, one that lacks the technical expertise. How on earth are they even going to manage to create transformation? And they can't even pay their own employees. I guess the reality is that South Africa cannot afford another decade. No, we need a government, not a struggle movement. And we kind of need it now. I enjoyed spending the time with you. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, drop me a like, drop me a comment. It really gives my channel a boost. It tells YouTube it should be pushing it out to new audiences. Shout out to Nikki and Paul, part of the Next Randall's Club. You are all invited for the small price of $14.99 a month, which is the price of a small Coke. You can support me in making these videos, which I really enjoy doing for you guys. Okay, before I digress into some other topic, I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Thank you for sticking it through with me. Have a great day. Over and out.